Welcome to TRT World. I'm Nadia Muftic, and in this week's Across the Balkans, we bring you the latest stories from the region and how countries, governments, and the population are affected. Thousands of Sarajevo residents took to the streets in protest after a tram accident 2 weeks ago. The accident left one young man dead and 4 others injured, among them a 17-year-old girl who lost her leg. The protesters, mainly young people, are demanding accountability and a full investigation. Armin Totic reports from Sarajevo.
Across Bosnia and Herzegovina's capital, Sarajevo, calls for accountability and change echoed through the streets. 2 weeks after a tram accident that left one person dead, thousands of citizens protested in the streets. Their message to cantonal authorities was clear: the tragedy must not pass without consequences.
Motiviralo me to što me motiviralo prethodnih svih ovih dana. Zapitao sam se šta bi se desilo da se ovo meni desilo. I izašao sam sa tom mišlju da sistem je doslovno mogao svakoga od nas na ovaj način da ubije, da zgazi, da pokuša da zataška.
Meni je stvarno žao što je bila potrebna još jedna smrt, još jedne mlade osobe koja je imala cijeli život ispred sebe i da mi izađemo na ulice, ali sam stvarno sretna što smo ipak izašli i što smo ustrajali ovome i nadam se da nećemo prestati dok se neka promjena ne desi.
Zanemarila sam svoje obaveze i sve što sam imala na par dana jer ovo je zaista velika stvar za nas mlade. Godinama smo šutjeli, govorili smo nesreća, bit će bolje, slušali smo i starije ljude koji su se navikli na još gore i nažalost nikad nismo imali hrabrost i snagu da izađemo. Ali sad su konačno krenuli i nadam se da će se ovo nastaviti.
Ovo ne bi trebalo da se događa i mi tražimo pravdu, tražimo transparentnost i želim da vidim ljude koji su stvarno krivi za ovo da napokon istrpe neke posljedice.
The tragedy unfolded on February 12th. When a tram derailed near the National Museum. One person was killed and 4 others injured, one of them seriously. The tram driver has since been released from custody, while prosecutors continue investigating the causes of the accident. Questions have emerged regarding video surveillance. There was no footage from the tram, as the surveillance system had reportedly been non-functional since late November. Authorities are examining how the system remained out of service for months. Political consequences followed quickly. Sarajevo Canton Prime Minister Edi Rama resigned 3 days after the accident, citing moral responsibility. A day later, the director of the public city transport operator Gras also stepped down. Until a new prime minister is appointed, the canton is functioning under a caretaker mandate in a year when Bosnia and Herzegovina is heading toward general elections. Protesters have called for an emergency session of the cantonal assembly to formally accept the prime minister's resignation, to debate public transport safety, and to demand urgent systemic reform. Journalist and socio-political commentator Rubina Cengic warns that Sarajevo could descend into a political crisis in which differing parties may use the situation for mutual accusations, further confusing citizens.
Predugo smo čekali odgovor. Ja ne mislim da je ovo neka sad velika odgovornost. Vidimo jedan dobar broj ministara koji kaže ja nemam nikakve veze s tim, to nije moj resor. Dakle, ljudi ne razumiju da ulazak u vladu, ulazak u ministarstvo sobom nosi odgovornosti čak i kada niste lično odgovorni za nešto. Postoji nešto što se zove društvena, politička odgovornost. Vi ste dio nekog tijela koje je loše radilo posao. Da podsjetimo, ta vlada je imenovala direktora javnog preduzeća Gras, koji je dozvolio da iz njegovog preduzeća izađe pokvaren tramvaj.
Sociologist Samir Forić says the student protests were expected as a reaction to a series of tragedies that occurred in recent months, with the death of a student becoming an emotional trigger for broader social mobilization.
Mladi poručuju društvu da su tu, da su oni nova generacija koja možda ne slijedi iste principe ili ista pravila koji su to stariji radili, da ne žele da šute, da žele da se njihov glas čuje, da nije bitno ko obnaša vlast, dakle da stranke nisu bitne, da je bitno jedino da ljudi koji sjede u pozicijama vlasti odgovorno rade svoj posao, ukoliko to ne rade, da onda daju ostavku ili da trpe pritisak mladih.
Tragedies like this have triggered public anger across the region before, and in Sarajevo, the focus is now on what happens next. Authorities are under pressure to respond at a moment when public safety has become a test of trust between citizens and the state. Armin Totic, across the Balkans, Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Many of those protesters believe the accident was not an isolated incident, but part of deeper institutional failings. While officials speak about maintaining European standards, the reality is the infrastructure is often neglected and crumbling. Questions are growing about governance and responsibility in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We spoke with Denis Dzidic, Executive Director of the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network. We asked whether these protests could spark real change. Merima Mulic has more.
Mr. Dzidic, thank you for speaking to TRT World. Locals see a tram derailment as more than just a freak accident. Is this a localized maintenance failure or an indictment of the state's inability to function?
Well, I think it's too early for us to speak in absolutes about what really happened in the tram. The investigation is ongoing and we don't really have all of the information ready to speak about what exactly happened in this case. However, when we talk about the protests and the reactions of the people, I think it's important to understand the amount of corruption and amount of misgovernance that we have seen for 3 decades after the war of the public companies that provide services in the city. Simply speaking, we are now, about 10 days since the accidents, and we alone have had 2 different investigations that have shown money being spent for maintenance of the brake systems, for procurement of companies who are buying the key operating parts for the actual rotors and the motors that are driving the trams, that were given to companies without any prior experience, that were given to companies that were in some cases created only a year or a year and a half before they received the money. And in the procurement details, we see that the government of Sarajevo Canton didn't ask for any kind of previous expertise, any kind of guarantees, and the money was simply given to companies that they wanted to work with in a violation of the law on public procurement in the country. We have had prior cases of abuse of office related to the public company that is in charge of all of the public transport in the city of Sarajevo, which has also been a case in point of the political capture of this institution and the judiciary, because the case lasted for more than a decade for various abuses in office for the previous director. For multiple contracts that he signed through public procurement, and all of those were extremely problematic, which is still unfinished. And it has shown how the judiciary is often being used to kind of to make drawn out cases that simply kind of disappear from the public's eye, and then through them some people get off the hook.
Leadership often benchmarks progress against European standards. How do you reconcile those EU ambitions with a reality where basic infrastructure is quite literally falling off the tracks?
I think the problem with Bosnia and Herzegovina is one of understanding what was needed in the country. So we have had a pre-war, a war, and a post-war period during which we've had pretty much the same political elites or similar ones. We've never gone through a significant process of lustration, of vetting, of removal of office from those individuals, and unfortunately they have managed within this international interventionism, with the Office of the High Representative, with their own political capture of the system based on ethnic values, they've managed to create a system where there is no accountability. simply because it's such a complex system and you can always point fingers. That is on the state level, that is on the entity level, that's on the cantonal level, that's the problem, that's because the Serbs are stopping us, the Croats are stopping us, the Bosniaks are stopping us. Everybody has a national veto opportunity to stop certain processes. And in reality, that has facilitated a system where politicians are in charge of all of the processes. And in reality, they have little or no interest of joining the EU, because the EU means more accountability, the EU means indictments, the EU means rule of law, when in reality they now control funds, they control public procurement, they control concessions, they control government positions, they control hiring through private entities which they give tenders to, but then also all of the public infrastructure that's available. And that's a huge controlling mechanism. And so what we have been doing for the past couple of decades is faking our way through EU reform processes. So the reality is that there's very little push from inside to change. Most people that want things to change are leaving because it's very easy to leave to the EU. And then the politicians are kind of just holding back, understanding that as the Western Balkans draw closer to the European Union, Montenegro is expected to come in a couple of years, Albania a close second. And then as that kind of continues, the EU is very unlikely to leave kind of a black hole with most of its citizens having EU passports. So it's likely that they will kind of want to push us in. And seeing how things are happening, with Orban, with illiberal democracies in Europe, with Fico's Slovakia, I think the understanding of the political side here is that they can just be smart enough to wait it out and then to come inside the EU as is without very significant reforms, which would ensure their position and not mean they have to give up any power or potentially go to jail, which many of them should for corruption and connections to organized crime.
Protesters are demanding a functional state, not just an apology. Do you think this is a start of a genuine civic awakening, or will it be stifled by the same political inertia that led to this tragedy?
I think, unfortunately, it is very unlikely that this will develop into a full-scale civic movement that can facilitate change for many different reasons. One, we are in an election year. Secondly, we are only a few months, after a very stressful situation in which we've had, multiple decisions of the courts which have led through much instability in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where at a certain point in time, for weeks and weeks, the entire Bosnian Serb leadership, including Milorad Dodik, was actually, there were warrants for their arrest, they were fugitives in their own country, and we had two different police units, one against one another. The state-level police that was supposed to arrest Dodik and his a couple of his close associates, while the Bosnian Serb police force stood in block of this decision. And considering the fact of the trauma that we had during the war, the mass violence that was committed by police forces, I think it's quite understanding the amount of trauma that has kind of stirred in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I think it's important to understand that there is no appetite for anything like that, anything similar ever again, certainly at this point in time. And from that position, I think that many people are unwilling to be extreme in their demands.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.
A political crisis is unfolding in Albania around Deputy Prime Minister Belinda Balluku and the growing corruption scandal. Protests in Tirana erupted after the country's anti-corruption body asked Parliament to lift her immunity. Prime Minister Edi Rama has responded with proposed legal changes, deepening tensions between the government and judicial authorities. The case is now testing Albania's commitment to the rule of law and its path to EU membership. Adam Amunu has this story.
While Albania's Prime Minister Edi Rama was attending the opening of Donald Trump's Board of Peace in Washington, this was the uproar happening outside his government's headquarters in the capital Tirana. Police fired water cannons and tear gas to disperse anti-corruption protesters, who in recent months have taken to the streets, calling for Rama to resign. And it's all because of scandals involving his now suspended Deputy Prime Minister Belinda Balluku. Tensions have escalated since December after Balluku was indicted for allegedly interfering in the government bidding process for major infrastructure projects, a charge that she denies but has led to her suspension.
Ne protestojmë për demokraci në fund fundit, për vjedhjet që po I bëjnë këtij populli. Vjedhje shkatërrimtare nga gjitha anët. Vjedha ne. Populli I ka shku thë I kanë parë, si I thojmë.
Këtu jemi mbledhur për të protestuar ndaj një qeverie që është më e korruptuara që ka pas historia e Shqipërisë, e cila ka bërë vjedhje galopante, e cila po varfron këtë popullsi, e cila po e shpopullon këtë popullsi, e cila nuk meriton të jetë 24 ora të kuashtë.
The case has exposed a deep-seated dispute between the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office and the government over the scope of the country's judiciary's power. On the one hand, the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, also known as SPAC, wants Parliament to take further steps to lift the constitutional immunity for officials, including Balluku, which hampers corruption investigations. On the other hand, Albania's government wants to curb any type of judicial overreach, which Rama says can cause more problems than solve them. Rama said he would change the law to ensure that ministers cannot be suspended simply for being under criminal investigation.
Pra në momentin kur pezullohet një ministër, nuk pezullohet thjesht vajtja në punë e një individi, pezullohet puna e një institucioni. Mjafton t'ju sjell këtu një nga momentet që pasojnë, që ajo ministri nuk ka më kapacitet të propozoj asgjë në Këshillin e Ministrave, sepse nuk përfaqësohet nga personi I ngarkuar si përfaqësues I vullnetit kushtetues.
It has led to opposition leaders like Sali Berisha accusing the government of harming the country's judicial independence. It's not the first time Albania has been embroiled in this dispute. In 2023, SPAC wanted former Deputy Prime Minister Arben Ahmetang arrested for alleged passive corruption and money laundering. He fled the country before his immunity could be waived. But fighting corruption goes beyond Albania's domestic politics and extends to its regional ambitions to join the European Union. In November, the EU opened its final negotiating cluster with Albania, which it hopes to conclude in 2 years, paving the way for the country to finally become an EU member by 2030. However, it's now at a stage where the process will be judged on the rule of law, the justice system, and anti-corruption efforts. For many Albanians, the question of justice goes beyond one minister or one investigation. It is about whether the country has strong mechanisms for accountability. For the government, it is about ensuring that institutions do not collapse under the weight of these mechanisms. As Albania moves closer to the European Union, that balance may be decisive for the country's political standing, both at home and abroad. Adam Aminu, across the Balkans.
Once a symbol of untouched nature, Bosnia and Herzegovina's celebrated Drina River is today choked by pollution. Activists warn the cause of the pollution is not limited to one country, but rather an issue for the whole region. Denis Dzidic has more.
The Visegrad Reservoir Lake, Bosnia and Herzegovina. At first glance, it looks like a picturesque postcard scene. However, upon closer inspection, a sad reality becomes evident. Its beauty is marred by excessive waste, from dead animals, medical waste, car parts, plastic bottles, cans and barrels. Everything can be found in this floating waste dump. Dejan Furtula has been fighting for years against the pollution of Bosnia's longest river.
Ovaj otpad dolazi sa nelegalnih deponija koje se nalaze na obalama rijeka u susjednim opštinama. Svake godine kada je povećanje vodostaja, kada su velike kiše I snjegovi, rijeka Drina nadođe, pokupi sav taj otpad i donese nama. Ovo je međunarodni, znači međuopćinski da kažem problem. On kreće iz Crne Gore, preko Srbije dolazi do Bosne i Hercegovine.
Furtula says people seem not to understand the health risk involved. Removing 10,000 cubic meters of plastic packaging and wood debris takes 3 to 4 months.
Mi smo čitave godine angažovani na tom održavanju, ne samo uklanjanju, nego prosto tu ima i održavanje lančanica i uverili smo se svaki put sa svakim povećanjem vodostaja. Mi imamo i snimke iz Bijelog polja gdje je čak komunalno preduzeće kipa otpad na samu obalu Lima, odnosno preduzeće koje bi moralo da čisti to smeće, oni se ponašaju tako da kipaju u sami Lim.
Azra Šehić-Kustura of environmental advocacy organization Arhus says the issue is not just a local one, but a basin-wide and transboundary problem affecting a wider region.
Cleanup actions are necessary, but they will never be a long-term solution unless we stop waste at the source. The second problem is less visible, but equally harmful. Wastewater and point source pollution combined with gaps in waste and wastewater management system in part of the basin. That is why prevention matters. Removing illegal dumps near waterways, improving wastewater infrastructure, and ensuring regular monitoring with results that are public and comparable over time.
More and more concerned citizens are calling on governments in the region to raise environmental standards. Without significant investment to correct the ills, hopes of joining the European Union may very end up being discarded, just like the garbage in this river. Teda Imamović, Across the Balkans.
In the small village of Donje Ljubinje in Kosovo, a centuries-old tradition of decorating brides continues among the local Bosnian community. Many believe these rituals protect brides from the evil eye and ensures a destiny of fortune. But the practice is now under threat. Azra Vildic has the story.
Before the dress, before the music, before the wedding begins, there is silence. In the Bosniak village of Donje Ljubinje, nestled in the foothills of the Shar Mountains near Prizren, a bride undergoes a stunning traditional transformation before taking her vows. The bride's face becomes a living canvas, shaped by belief, memory, and the hands of women who came before her. The practice is believed to have begun hundreds of years ago, formed by local customs unique to this region. On the wedding day, the process takes nearly 2 hours. The face is fully covered in a thick white base, creating a blank surface upon which detailed patterns are carefully painted. Gold cycles, red dots, and blue lines slowly emerge. Each symbol has a purpose for fertility, health, prosperity, and protection from the so-called evil eye. This knowledge is not written, it lives through the hands of those who remember. 73 years old Aziza Seftegić is one of the last women in the village who still practice the art.
I sam došla do ovoga još i u starost da šarim. Ova tradicija da ne se ukine, da ima još da traje, još mnogo godine da traje. Jer ovo treba, svakomu treba, možda nekoj neće, ali nekoj možda hoće.
Once the painting is complete, the bride is covered with a veil. Her face remains hidden, her voice silent, marking her separation from her family and the moment between who she was and who she is about to become. The ritual is not merely cosmetics. Tourism worker Medisa Sagati explains its deeper meaning.
Lice se oslikava, kod nas se smatra da je, zašto se oslikava lice, to je kao neka tranzicija, prelazak iz devojke u ženu, s jedne strane, a s druge strane protiv uroka. Ranije se smatralo da kao ako je devojka lepša ili neka nije lepa, to da se ne vidi uopšte kakva i da je ne ureknu ako je jako lepa, da onda se prekriva lice i onda budu ono kao sve su devojke iste.
For villagers, the ritual represents continuity. Traditionally, the veil is not lifted until the bride reaches her new home.
Da je svi komentarišu kako je šta, ako je izdržala i ako nije, šminka obrisana i ako je sve došla u komadu, da kažem, onda se kaže da je to, ona će biti jaka, moći će da podnese sve poslove u kući, koje očekuju, porod i tako.
Only then is her painted face revealed, a sign of acceptance into her husband's family and her new role in the community. While the practice has faded in urban areas, here in the Shar region, it remains a central element of the wedding ceremonies. In a world moving ever faster, this village chose to pause, to honor a tradition shaped by time, belief and knowledge, preserved not in books but in memory. This rite of passage is a quiet act of resistance, preserving identity, belief and culture memory, one bride at a time. As the village across the Balkans.
Thank you for watching TRT World and letting us once again take you across the Balkans. That is all from the team for this week. We hope to see you next time.